We're getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
For more than 3 months, one reporter stayed closer to the Nancy Guthrie investigation than almost anyone else in the country. While social media creators built theories and online forums chased rumors, he remained in Tucson, speaking with sources, following developments, and gathering information directly connected to the case. Then someone finally asked him the question that had dominated the internet since Nancy vanished. What about Nancy's daughter Annie and her husband Tommaso? His answer was short, direct. And if people had listened to it from the beginning, months of speculation might never have happened. But before we get to what he said, you need to understand why those words mattered so much. Because what happened to Nancy Guthrie was never a simple missing person case. Nancy was 84 years old and lived independently in Tucson, Arizona. She was active, close with her family, and deeply involved in her weekly church community. Her children remained a major part of her life, especially her daughter Annie, who lived only a short drive away. On January 31st, Nancy spent the evening with Annie and her husband Tommaso. They shared dinner, played games, and enjoyed what appeared to be a completely ordinary family gathering. Later that night, Tommaso drove Nancy home. Security records showed Nancy arriving safely. The garage door opened, she entered the house, and the garage closed behind her. That was the last confirmed moment anyone knows Nancy was safe. Hours later, the pattern becomes disturbing. Around 1:47 in the morning, Nancy's doorbell camera suddenly went offline. Not because of a power outage. Not because the battery died. Someone deliberately disconnected it. Think about what that means. Whoever approached the house knew the camera existed. They knew where it was located. And they knew it had to be disabled before they entered the camera's field of view. That is not random behavior. That is preparation. Then another critical event occurred. Nancy wore a pacemaker that communicated with monitoring systems. At approximately 2:28 a.m., that signal stopped transmitting. Investigators believe the interruption is consistent with Nancy being moved away from the phone that remained inside her house. Within less than an hour, multiple electronic systems went silent. The camera, the motion data, the pacemaker connection. Not chaos. A sequence. A plan. The following morning, Nancy failed to appear at her regular virtual church service. Friends immediately noticed something was wrong. Calls went unanswered. Family members were contacted. When relatives arrived at Nancy's home, they found something alarming. Her phone was still inside. Her purse was still inside. Personal belongings remained exactly where they should have been. For an elderly woman who lived independently, those were not items she would normally leave behind voluntarily. Soon after, law enforcement arrived and began examining the property. What they found only deepened concerns. Rear access points had been intentionally propped open. Investigators recovered biological evidence linked to Nancy. And eventually authorities reached a conclusion that changed everything. Nancy had been taken against her will. Then came one of the most important developments in the entire investigation. Investigators released footage showing an unidentified individual near Nancy's home. The person appeared masked, armed, and moving with purpose. At that moment, you might think public attention would remain focused on the mysterious figure captured near the scene. Instead, something very different happened. The internet chose different suspects. Within days, online speculation shifted away from the unidentified individual and toward Annie and Tommaso. Why? Because they were the last known people to see Nancy alive. That was the foundation. Nothing more. Tommaso drove her home. He watched her enter safely. Then he left. Those facts were transformed into countless theories across social media. People analyzed body language, examined interviews, questioned family behavior, studied ordinary actions as if they contained hidden meanings. The theories multiplied rapidly despite one major problem. Evidence never followed. There was no public document connecting Annie or Tommaso to a crime. No law enforcement announcement. No forensic finding. No witness statement. No charges. Yet speculation continued growing. Then another event added fuel to the discussion. Authorities seized Annie's vehicle. For many online observers, that immediately became proof of guilt. But experienced investigators viewed it differently. Former law enforcement professionals explained that vehicles connected to a victim's final known movements are commonly examined in serious investigations. Modern vehicles contain enormous amounts of information. Location history, door activity, sensor data, potential trace evidence. Some experts even suggested investigators could have been checking whether someone had secretly placed a tracking device on the vehicle. Think about that possibility. If someone had been monitoring Nancy's movements, tracking Annie's vehicle would reveal exactly when Nancy visited and when she returned home. In that scenario, the vehicle would not represent evidence against the family. It would represent evidence that someone else had been watching them. Eventually, reports indicated the vehicle was being returned. But by then, most of the attention had already been spent on the seizure itself, not the explanation. Then another controversy appeared. A law enforcement official made comments suggesting investigators had initially been told the family believed Nancy may have wandered away. The statement spread quickly. Later, the official issued a correction, explaining he had misspoken. But as often happens online, the original claim traveled much farther than the clarification. The result was predictable. More suspicion. More speculation. More accusations. Meanwhile, the official record continued telling a very different story. Authorities repeatedly stated the family was cooperative. Investigators continued pursuing leads focused on the unidentified suspect. And eventually, the sheriff made an unusually direct statement. He said the Guthrie family, including siblings and spouses, had been cleared as suspects. Not partially cleared. Not temporarily cleared. Cleared. He also described accusations against them as cruel. That word matters. Law enforcement officials rarely use language like that publicly unless they feel strongly about what is happening. Additional reports indicated immediate family members had cooperated extensively throughout the investigation. Yet even then, online theories continued. By that point, speculation had developed its own momentum. People were no longer following evidence. They were defending conclusions they had already chosen. And that's where the reporter's statement becomes so important. After months of reporting, months of speaking with sources, months of following every development, he was asked directly whether he had seen evidence connecting Annie or Tommaso to Nancy's disappearance. His response was simple. I've never seen any evidence that anyone in the family is involved. Not maybe. Not we'll see. Not nothing public yet. He said he had never seen evidence. That statement carried weight because this was not someone repeating a press release. This was a reporter who had challenged officials when he believed they were wrong. Someone willing to question authority. Someone deeply connected to the investigation. And after all of that reporting, he found nothing pointing toward the family. Instead, the evidence continued pointing somewhere else. Toward the masked individual. Toward unknown DNA recovered during the investigation. Toward an unidentified vehicle seen near the relevant time frame. Toward someone who appeared to possess detailed knowledge of Nancy's routines, property, and movements. While the internet spent months debating family members who had been publicly cleared, the unidentified suspect remained exactly that. Unidentified. And that may be the most important lesson in this entire case. Attention is valuable. Every hour spent chasing unsupported theories is an hour not spent focusing on the evidence that actually exists. Nancy Guthrie remains missing. The investigation remains active. The unidentified figure seen near her home has never been publicly identified. The unknown DNA continues to be analyzed. And somewhere, someone may still possess the information investigators need. Because when all the noise is stripped away, the facts point in one direction. Not toward a family dinner. Not toward a driveway. Not toward internet speculation. They point toward the person who came prepared, disabled a camera, moved through the darkness, and disappeared before anyone realized Nancy Guthrie was gone. That is where the mystery remains. And that is where the answers are most likely waiting to be found.